So we have launched these Google Form questionnaires. We've used them for 2 previous subgroup meetings, and they're still pretty new, but they do contain questions that are related to the concepts brought up in the meetings. All questions are optional, and it's just another opportunity to provide feedback. So today's Google Form questionnaire link is on the screen, and Amanda is also going to be putting that in the chat. And we do ask that you try to fill these out within a week from each meeting. And if it's been longer than a week and you still want to provide feedback, just send us an email. And I am going to be covering a few different items later on in this presentation. These are the links to all of the documents that I'll be referencing. We just wanted to provide them all on one slide so that it's easy to go back and look at those documents after this presentation. And with that, I'll hand it back to Natalie.
All right, thank you, McKenna. So as you could probably see from that last slide with all the links, we do have a lot to cover on the agenda today. So we are going to jump right in. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for logging in today. We are really looking forward to this meeting today and covering a whole lot of information. If we could go to the agenda slide, please. We are going to be talking about the non-per capita program in the Municipal Conservation Program today. So both ADWR staff and AMWA staff have put a lot of work into kind of building out some of the details of the discussions that we've had in previous meetings of this group. So we're really excited to be sharing some of that work with you today. You'll see that none of what we're sharing today is any kind of a done deal, but rather we have a lot of options to kind of work through and a lot of different ways that we can approach this program and a lot of ways we can build this program into something stronger and better. So today's meeting, I will provide just a little bit of background on kind of where we've been up until now. And then we do have a guest presentation by Sam Draper from AMWA talking about the proposal that they have put together. After Sam, McKenna will be talking about some of the work that ADWR has done as well, and we'll be talking through some of the different details and different aspects of this program. So to back up just a little bit again, my name is Natalie Mast. I am the program manager working on management plans here at ADWR. We do have some additional ADWR staff on the webinar today. Amanda Long-Rodriguez is running our webinar today. If you need any help muting or unmuting, that kind of thing, she is going to be helping us out with that today. Maggie Martin is on our chat if you would like to speak or if you have any comments that you would like to put in the chat box. Maggie will be helping out with that today. And McKenna Welsh is going to be helping out with part of our presentation and explaining some of the work that we ADWR have been doing on some of the details of this municipal non-per capita program. So we will go ahead and jump in. So like I said, we are going to be talking about the municipal non-per capita program. We've been doing a lot of work on that program over the course of these meetings. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the municipal, the municipal non-per capita conservation program is one of our conservation programs for Muni that is required by statute. It is, we shall include this conservation program in the management plans. The way that it's structured is essentially a BMP program. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the way that has been structured in the past is as a tiered BMP point system. The tiers are determined by the number of service connections in a provider service area. That is something that is indicated by the statute, that those tiers, that if we're going to have those tiers, that they should be determined by service connections. And then each tier has a target number of BMP points that they should achieve. The non-per capita program is for large providers. There is a separate program for small providers or large untreated providers. So this is specific to large municipal providers. If we could go to the next slide, please. So a lot of the work that we've done in these meetings up until now has kind of been approaching updates to this non-per capita program in a few different ways. So the first approach we've taken, and something we've spent a lot of time on so far, is discussing the individual BMPs. Do we have the correct BMPs in there? Individual BMPs need to be edited? Do some of them need to be removed? That type of thing. We do now have posted on our website a draft BMP list that is available for comment. We have a separate Google form that is available for you all to comment on those individual BMPs. So we're not going to get into that list really today, but that list, taking into consideration a lot of the feedback we've heard throughout these meetings, we wanted to put a draft out there to kind of get some of that conversation rolling as well. Here are the edits that we've heard from you so far. Please provide us any additional feedback that you may have using that Google form. So that is available on our website. So we've looked at edits to the program based on those individual BMPs. We've also looked at edits to the program based on the BMP categories. Is the structure of these categories correct? Do we need to recategorize, rework those categories at all? Should we add in minimum or maximum points for those categories, or require that points be earned from a minimum number of categories? There's a lot of different ways that we'll talk about approaching these things over the course of this meeting and the upcoming meetings. And then the third way we're kind of looking at these updates, so individual BMPs, BMP categories, the third way is the provider tiers. How do we define those tiers, and what are our points for each individual tier? So obviously that's a lot of details, a lot of moving parts here, but we are really excited about some of the ideas we've heard about how all of this is kind of coming together, and we are looking forward to discussing a lot of this further over the course of this meeting and upcoming meetings. So things that we'll have to do in future meetings, we'll obviously need to discuss some of this more, but we'll also need to consider the GPCD program and any additional alternative programs that may be helpful for the fifth management plans. We will come back to that just a little bit as we're wrapping up at the end of this meeting. Yeah, but that's kind of at least the structure of how we've been approaching this so far, and how we're going to move forward with some of these conversations. So if we could go to the next slide, please. With that kind of introduction, I'm gonna go ahead and transition over to Sam. Like I said, AMWA has taken a lot of time to consider a lot of these details that I've just kind of laid out here, and has put together a proposal that Sam Draper will be presenting on today. We kind of, as I alluded to, we don't really see this as a competing proposal, but rather a way that we can get different ideas out there about the details of each of those kind of categories, those paths that we're working on, to bring together the different components of this program, bring together the strongest program that we can. So thank you to Sam, thank you to AMWA for all of the work that they've done, and I will go ahead and hand it off to her.
Thank you, Natalie. Good morning, everyone. As Natalie said, my name is Sam Draper. I am the Conservation Efficiency Program Manager for the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, AMWA. Next, thank you. Today, I'm going to be sharing AMWA's proposal on the non-per capita conservation program structure. We really want to take this opportunity to look at the overall program structure and see how we could improve upon it. Next slide. All right, so I have a lot of information I want to go over. So just to outline it, I'm going to talk about our background and goals, the 5th management plan, non-per capita conservation program structure proposal, tiers by service connection, the structure, program requirements, and a beyond compliance idea. Next slide, please. All right, background and goals. AMWA's driving ideologies behind our proposal was to first maintain Arizona's national reputation of leadership in water conservation. Everyone knows that the Groundwater Management Act is innovative. Arizona is really well known for it, and we want to continue that legacy into the future by maintaining and continuing to update our management plans and conservation efforts. We also want to elevate overall conservation efforts and move the needle in demand management, would decrease those withdrawals of groundwater. We also want to expand reporting requirements to enhance decision-making and future policies, as well as raise visibility and increase understanding about the importance of water conservation. Next slide. All right, tiers by service connections. Next slide. As Natalie had mentioned, the tiers by service connection is statutorily required. In the 4th management plan, Tier 1 was broken up into 0 to 5,000 total service connections. Tier 2 was 5,001 to 30,000, and Tier 3 is 30,001 plus. For the 5th management plan, we wanted to look at making this more granular to be more appropriate to the service level of the different providers. So we wanted to break it down from 0 to 1,000, 1,001 to 5,000, 5,001 to 30,000, and 30,001 plus. Next slide, please. All right, so I wanted to show everyone this slide. One of our goals was to make it more of have a normal distribution in that beautiful bell curve that we shoot for statistically, so that it was more evenly spread out amongst the tiers and then therefore the requirements. So I'm going to pause on the tiers conversation right there, since we're going to come back to it towards the end of the presentation with McKenna. Next slide. All right, for the 4th management plan non-per capita structure, it's broken up into a basic public information program, additional BMPs with 7 categories, and then a procedure for adding a BMP. We really wanted to rework this and see if there was a way to streamline and simplify. So for our 5th management plan non-per capita structure, we're proposing the following. Next slide, please. Thank you. First, we wanted to have a public engagement program with a required component and a supplemental component. Next, we have those best management practices broken out into 4 categories, and then the procedure for adding a best management practice. I'm going to go into each of those a little bit more in the subsequent slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, public engagement program. We really wanted to focus on why we're conserving. So the public engagement component is crucial. Next slide, please. We wanted to have a required component and a supplemental component because increasing awareness of the need to conserve water and inform customers of the importance of conserving water is crucial and key to any conservation program. Next slide. Required public engagement program. The current basic public engagement program only has 2 components. We wanted to elevate that and expand upon it into 2020. We wanted to make these requirements a little bit more rigorous to ensure that providers are communicating with their customers and will therefore help make their programs more successful. Next slide, please. Supplemental components. Oh, I'm sorry. Would you mind going back one? I got excited. Thank you. So we wanted to break it out into required and supplemental. So the required components would be required of all utilities, since these are all best practices that are current with the times. And then supplemental public engagement components would be required based on the size of the utility and based on tier connections, service connections by tier. So these are additional educational and communication components that utilities would be able to choose from to supplement their public engagement. Next slide, please. Best management practices. All right. Per the fourth management plan, a best management practice is a measure that results in reduced water consumption or increased water use efficiency. Where the public engagement components were qualitative and educational pieces, the best management practices are really more focused on reducing water consumption with actual water savings that can be quantifiable. We took the original best management practices and reclassified them into 4 new categories to simplify and streamline the process. We also wanted to remove the point values to place the focus on the reduced water consumption and or increased water use efficiency. We also wanted our intent behind this was also to streamline data collection for comparison's sake, so that we were comparing the amount of BMPs rather than the points. Another thing that we wanted to implement was expanding the BMP context to clarify. This includes separating the BMPs to have a description, a reporting requirement that's clarified, and a standard requirement that provides clear guidance on how to administer the best management practice. Next slide. All right, the first category is outreach services and rebates incentives. This is based on categories, if you'll remember, categories 3 and 6 from the fourth management plan. These are designed to promote, to provide customers with consultation audits and improve water efficiency, and to also incentivize these conservation efforts. We broke it out into residential and non-residential, so as to simplify again and streamline data collection. Next slide, please. All right, outreach services and rebates incentives. These are the residential components. Again, you'll largely see that these are the BMPs from the fourth management plan. We really want to hone in on the content of them. And you'll notice that there's a few BMPs that you don't recognize that are new. AMWA is currently working on gathering input for these BMPs and will be submitting information to DWR for future feedback from other stakeholders. Our goal in this is to have more options for people to choose from to make their programs the best for their service area. Next slide, please. All right, these are non-residential components. It's a mirror of the residential, non-residential, and commercial and industrial users in the municipal service area are really large water users and have been identified as another great opportunity for water savings. So we wanted to emphasize that by delineating it from the residential components. Next slide, please. Physical system evaluation and improvements. This is similar to category 4 in the current fourth management plan. These efforts are designed to ensure the water system is well maintained and working at optimal efficiency, or to increase the efficiency and resolve issues. Next slide, please. Sustainable water governance. This category is similar to the ordinances category, but it has a little bit of a sexier title to it. These are designed to reduce water use within a service area by limiting water use for specific purposes by means of ordinance. And we also wanted to give it a more broad title so that we could add future BMPs surrounding planning and organization. You'll see water conservation plan at the bottom because we feel it's important to integrate water conservation into water resource planning. Next slide, please. Research and innovation and demand management. These BMPs are designed to encourage and reward conducting, evaluating best management practices, new technologies, and new techniques. These are largely from the fourth management plan, and we really appreciate the opportunity for rewarding people for trying new things and publishing data and findings to make everyone's practices better. Next slide, please. All right, this is an overall skeleton of the structure. I want to take a moment and pause to see if anyone had any questions for me on this outline.
Thank you, Sam. I'm not seeing any questions or comments coming through yet.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next slide then to be mindful of everyone's time. All right, program requirements. The current fourth management plan has a basic public information program that has two components that are required of all of the tiers. And then there's the additional best management practices. The first tier is required to do 3 additional BMPs. The second is 8, and the third is 15. And there's no fourth. So for the fifth management plan, next slide, please. We wanted to have that 1A required public engagement program with 5 components, and then incrementally increase the supplemental requirements based on the tier size. So 1 for the second tier, 2 for the third, and 3 for the fourth. For the best management practices, because we did increase the requirements from the section 1, we started 2 BMPs, 4, 10, and 15. And we also wanted to add the caveat that they need to be from 2 or more BMP categories to help diversify programs to increase those withdrawals of water, groundwater. Next slide, please. Beyond compliance. So this was a new idea that we had. Of course, we have the compliance requirements that are required for regulatory purposes, but we also wanted to find a way to encourage folks to expand their programs, to have something to leverage so that they could increase staff funding and trying additional BMPs, and to also report on all of the BMPs that they're doing to increase the data that the state has available to it. So we created a beyond compliance tier. Next slide. So we wanted to have an exceeds and an exceptional category. So these are for folks who are going above and beyond. Again, we wanted to help those superstar programs stand out while not making all of the requirements more rigorous for everyone. So exceeds would be 1 additional supplemental requirement for each one under the public engagement program. And then under section 2, the BMPs increase in quantity and also must be from 3 or more categories. So it's a further diversified program. To be qualified as exceptional, there's increasing requirements, and all of the BMPs must be from all 4 categories. Our ultimate dream would be that the department would be able to have a dashboard where we could display the compliant, exceeds, and exceptional utilities to allow them to stand out, and again, to highlight the excellence in Arizona's water conservation community. Next slide, please. All right, so this is an overall kind of highlight slide from my plan that I proposed. On the left, you'll see that structure proposal, and on the right, I displayed the compliance requirements that we would be proposing. So I will pause for questions and any feedback.
Thank you, Sam. No questions or comments.
All right, I will turn it to you then, Natalie, or McKenna.
Thank you, Sam. So as you can see, kind of in those categories that I had mentioned earlier, sorry, Amanda, you can go to the next slide, please. in those categories that I had mentioned earlier, AMWA has kind of laid out some options for each of those categories. So I will be handing it off to McKenna Welch. She's going to talk about some of the work that ADWR has been doing to respond to some of the comments that we've already received on this program, and also further build out some of the details of this program. She'll also present on kind of what our various options are, working in possibly some of the things that AMWA presented or working in other options that we've further developed. So McKenna will talk through those details with you, and I'll hand it off to her.
Thanks, Natalie. So like Natalie said, I will be presenting on some of the work that's been done since our previous subgroup meetings. The first thing that I want to present to you is our new Appendix 5C layout. So on the left side, you can see the previous Fourth Management Plan Appendix 5C layout. This would just make it difficult sometimes to find a specific BMP or a specific reporting requirement that you were looking for. So we wanted to make this into more of a table format so that you could quickly reference what you're looking for. And so the dark rows, dark blue row, will show the category name and description. And then the lighter blue color will have the BMP number and name. And then below each BMP will be 3 different columns. So the first column has the point value, the second column has the BMP description, and then the third column will have the implementation and reporting requirements for that BMP. And so we're hoping that this design just makes it easier for you to find what you are looking for. So that Appendix 5C has all of the changes that have been incorporated up until this point. So we did take a lot of the input we received in our last 2 subgroup meetings, and we incorporated that into the Appendix 5C. But we also wanted to create a table that summarized those changes so you could quickly see what we are proposing from the 4th to the 5th management plans. And so I won't be going through every single change that we've proposed, but I'll give you some examples so that you know what kind of feedback we incorporated. So the first example is BMP 2.1, which is the new homeowner outreach. In our previous meetings, we heard that this BMP could create paper waste because it required a packet to be mailed out to all new homeowners. And it also wasn't very clearly defined on what packet meant. So we heard a suggestion that this would be more useful if it started out with a phone conversation where the provider could tell the customer what kind of conservation services are available, and then the provider could follow up with additional material through email or mail, depending on what the customer needs. Another piece of feedback we received was to split some of the BMPs into residential and non-residential. You can see that was done for BMPs 2.2 to 2.5 here on the screen. And it was also, we also split other BMPs throughout that list too in the same way. And then I wanted to provide an example of a new BMP that was added based on feedback that we received. So originally we had just BMP 3.3, which is the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Installation BMP. We heard that this is a great way to incentivize providers to take that initial step to install the AMI technology, but there wasn't an incentive for the ongoing maintenance that's required of that BMP. So we added an additional BMP, which is 3.4 AMI maintenance, so that providers could get credit for that ongoing maintenance that they're doing. And so those are just some examples of the changes we incorporated. We hope as you go through these documents that when you have other comments or suggestions that come up, that you will provide those to us, and we look forward to further developing these BMPs with all of your input. So I'm going to go over this proposal. This is for BMP implementation requirements that would increase with each tier level. So this is just an example that's on the screen. We would need to further develop this as a group if we were to go this route. But we were thinking for some of the more qualitative BMPs, this would be a way to better align the implementation requirements with the tier level. So the example here would be BMP 1.1, which is local or regional conservation campaign. So the BMP is worth 1 point, but to receive credit for this BMP, depending on your tier level, you would have different requirements. So for the tier 1 provider, they would just have to reach at least local customers and utilize at least one method of advertising media, whereas the tier 4 provider would have to reach regional customers and utilize at least 4 methods of advertising media. And so we realized this wouldn't be suitable for all BMPs, but we wanted to get any initial feedback you have on this type of structure and see if it's something that you would like to move forward with. Another proposal that we have is for a brand new planning category. And this was also from feedback we received in previous meetings. So we heard from some providers that they were interested in adding integrated water and land use planning BMPs. And once we started looking into this more, we realized that there was opportunity for a lot of BMPs related to either integrated water and land use planning or just general planning BMPs. So these questions are also in the Google form questionnaire in case you need more time to think about your answers. But we wanted to open up this discussion to see if you would be in favor of a planning category, and if so, what type of planning BMPs you would like to see. So I will pause here for a moment to see if anyone has any questions or comments about the past 2 proposals. And we can pause for a moment or so that you can think about these questions and respond whenever you're ready. So at this time, Maggie, do we have any questions?
Thank you, McKenna. I'm going to back up and share some feedback for Sam that came through from Carol. She has commented, clearly a lot of work went into this proposal. Thank you to the AMWA member staff and AMWA staff for all of the effort. This is greatly appreciated. No further questions or comments right now, McKenna.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol. We definitely recognize that we are throwing a lot of information at you. Part of what we're providing today is really just an overview of all of our different options. And we also want to provide opportunity both in today's meeting and through the questionnaires to provide feedback. I know sometimes this takes a little time to digest before you have a coherent comment. So through those questionnaires, we are hoping to provide a little bit of that space and allow multiple methods of feedback, both in the meetings and also after the meetings. So I know the link to the questionnaire is in the chat box. It's also in the presentation itself. Those things will be posted on our website. So there are many opportunities for feedback. We know that we're providing a lot of information here today. And we do want to be really clear that we are seeking feedback throughout all of this. We've had a really good engagement from this group, from all of our groups over the course of developing the fifth management plan so far. So we really appreciate that, and we'd really like to continue that feedback, that outreach, that engagement in further developing some of these concepts. So we are very much looking for kind of what we can't get from not being in person. We can't see you nodding your heads or shaking your heads. So so we do hope that you'll provide feedback in whatever way you are comfortable. Maggie, I think I saw a couple of questions come through.
Yes, thank you, Natalie. I have a comment and question here from Eric. He's commented, is ADWR open to a dashboard that shows how well water providers are doing on conservation? The department is the source of this type of information for many entities like legislatures, regional groups, and the media, and a dashboard or a rating system could be a useful feature to increase effectiveness in this area.
Sure, thanks, Eric. So we are definitely looking into kind of expanding our suite of dashboards. Some kind of a municipal dashboard is certainly on the horizon for us. The details of that dashboard are kind of yet to be determined, exactly what it shows. So we're happy to take that feedback, those suggestions that you provided here. Take that into consideration as we do the development for those dashboards. We appreciate that kind of detailed suggestion and feedback for those. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. And a comment from DWR and Carol, and she has commented, if it is easier to speak rather than chat, you are certainly welcome to comment your name in the chat box, and we will call on you to speak when it is convenient for you.
Yes, thank you for that reminder, Carol. I appreciate it. We know it can be a little awkward going through the chatter or chiming in on these webinars. So, but we do want you to all feel comfortable engaging in similar ways as we would in person. We're going to be using these webinar formats for the foreseeable future at this point. So, so we are wanting to do our best to consider how we're engaging using this format, and also work to make that engagement easier for you all. So thank you for that, Carol.
All right, thank you. Well, we do look forward to your feedback on all of these topics. So whether that's when you email us or in our next meeting or through the Google form questionnaire, we look forward to those. So next I'm going to be getting into the non-per capita tier structures. So the slide is showing the requirements for the tiers, BMP points, and categories for the fourth management plans. And then on the right, it outlines the options that we have for the fifth management plans. So for the tier requirements, the first step, which is that highlighted text there, is for this group to decide how many tiers there should be and what those service connections per tier should look like. Once there's a consensus on that, then we can kind of move into these other options. But I just wanted to outline them so that it's something that we can start the discussion about and come back to in later meetings. So after there's a consensus on how many tiers there should be, then we would need to go in and decide what the point requirements per tier should be. And then speaking of point requirements, we have some options there as well. So we could go back to each BMP being treated as equal, which is what was suggested in AMWA's proposal. Or we could keep the current tier structure where certain BMPs are worth multiple points. And then as far as category requirements go, there have been none in the past, but that is an option that we could do moving forward. Some of the options that have come up so far would be to have points come from a minimum number of categories, which is what Sam was talking about in her presentation. We could also assign minimum or maximum number of point requirements per category. We could continue with no requirements, or if there are any other ideas that come up, we could go in that direction as well. So to help get this conversation started about management plan tiers, we wanted to create this dashboard just to show some of the options that are out there to get, just to get the conversation started. We can definitely look at other options besides these, but this is just to visualize what other ways we could organize tiers. So the way this dashboard works is each bar graph shows the number of providers that would fall under each proposal's tier. And these numbers are from all AMAs, and it's all large providers. So the top left bar graph would be the fourth management plan tiers as they are. The first proposal that's below that is very similar to the fourth management plan tiers, just with the addition of a fourth tier. And then proposal 2A and 2B in the middle are a descending option, one with 4 tiers and one with 5 tiers. So kind of similar to the fourth management plan descending, but a little bit more evenly distributed, and then with either a fourth or fifth tier. And then on the right-hand side, we have proposal 3A, which was also AMWA's proposal. And that's kind of more of that normal distribution or bell curve with 4 tiers. And below that would be similar, a normal distribution or a bell curve of 5 tiers. So I'm going to pause here just to give some people time to look at this. If any questions or comments come up, let us know. You can provide detailed comments on this too in the Google form. And there is a link to this dashboard available in this presentation and on our website. So if you wanted to look at this in more detail, it is interactive on our website, and you can click through each AMA to see how each proposal would work in each AMA. So yeah, I'll pause here and see if anyone has any comments.
Thank you, McKenna. I have a question here from Carlos. He commented, what would the difference be between land landing per ADWR and zoning?
I think Carlos, maybe jump back in and correct me if I'm misunderstanding here. I think you were trying to say the land use planning and zoning. So the BMP category that McKenna was talking about a couple slides ago would incentivize different land use planning activities by basically providing points under this program for those types of activities. So it might be different from zoning in a variety of different ways, depending on what those particular BMPs turned out to be. It might be incentivizing increased collaboration between water resource staff and land use staff, or different types of scenario planning activities. The category is kind of wide open. So I think the types of things we would incentivize there would just be a little bit different than the types of things zoning would dictate, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Natalie. Carlos has commented that he indeed was referring to land planning. Deanna has commented that she believes that the intent for this BMP links water and land use for planning. Kathy has a question. She's commented.
Sorry, Maggie, I cut you off there a little bit. Just to respond to Dina, yes, that's correct that it would be linking water and land use for planning, but it could also be other types of water planning type activities. We wanted to be a little bit broader than just specifically that link of water and land use, and be a little bit more general in this BMP category. Could be general planning related to water as well.
Thank you, Natalie. Question here from Kathy. She's commented, could it include collaboration between DWRD or private water companies and county government?
Thanks, Kathy. I think it could. I think it'll just kind of depend on how those specific BMPs in that category would end up getting written. So that type of suggestion or feedback on what we should include under that category in terms of the BMPs there, those types of suggestions could be really helpful. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Natalie. Carlos here, in reference to his previous question, he is wondering, would you do it at a development stage or the zoning stage?
And it looks like Aaron might have responded to him below there.
Yes, Aaron has commented it could occur at several stages, from planning to zoning to development review, multiple stages of land use processes. Val Little is wondering, what about ordinances?
Thanks, Val. So we do have, there already is a separate category for ordinances. We weren't planning on doing away with that, but perhaps some of those ordinances might fall under a planning category. That could be something we could consider.
Thank you, Natalie. Comment here from Carlos. I think that this is one thing to work on with municipality on its general plan versus compelling a developer to develop a certain way.
Sure, fair. That's fair feedback, Carlos. And I think maybe something to remember about this program as a whole is that we, with the exception of the one BMP or perhaps a couple BMPs at the very beginning that are under AMLA's proposal, they had a couple BMPs at the very beginning that would be mandatory. Most of the BMPs on this list are options that you can choose from. You can choose from a suite of options in order to meet the points requirements or BMP requirements under your tier. So the inclusion of a BMP or a category on this list doesn't necessarily compel anyone to have to do that BMP.
Thank you, Natalie. I have a comment here from Andrew. He's commented, regarding the tier proposals, if our goal is to continue moving the needle and driving conservation and efficiency, then the II.A. or II.B proposed tier structures make the most sense in order to have a higher percentage of providers in higher tiers.
Great, thank you, Andrew.
No further questions or comments.
So
looks like something could be coming through from John Munderlow, but nothing so far.
Thanks, Maggie. Something we will want to consider, McKenna pointed out on the dashboard that you can, on the online version, which is interactive, you can filter by AMA. So something we'll want to consider as we continue in this discussion is how this applies across the AMAs. We think that it makes sense to have the tiers the same across the AMAs. And in the example of some of the smaller AMAs, they might not have any providers in highest tier, but that would allow for, if those providers were to grow, they could grow into that additional category. And it would allow some equivalency across the AMAs, kind of focusing on the size of the provider rather than the specific location for this particular aspect of the program. So that's also something that we're open to taking feedback on.
Thank you, Natalie. No questions or comments at this time. John, I'm not sure if you wanted to speak, but if that was your intent, you're welcome to unmute yourself. Otherwise, no questions or comments.
Okay, so from here, I was handing it back to Natalie. All right, Natalie, you can take it away for the closing.
Thanks, McKenna. So I will, I'm not sure if John was going to jump in here at some point, but I will allow a little bit of additional time for questions if anyone was still trying to get any questions or anything in the chat box once I wrap up just a little bit here. So again, thank you to AMWA, to Sam, and to McKenna and the other ADWR staff that contributed to all of this. There's obviously been a lot of work and a lot of discussion that has occurred since our last meeting. Again, we are kind of trying to pick and choose and assemble the pieces that will make this the strongest program that we can make it. So, so we have a lot of options here. McKenna discussed those in the chart that she had, showing all of our different options for the 5 MPs. So there are a lot of different options here. There are a lot of different ways that we can build this, but we're definitely looking for involvement from all of you, feedback from all of you in kind of your preferences and what you see as being the most reasonable, being the best for conservation at each for each item. So if we could just go to the next slide, please. So again, kind of coming back to what I had mentioned at the beginning, we're working through feedback and updates for individual BMPs, for the BMP categories, and for those provider tiers. So our work over the next months is going to be to bring together feedback for all of those items and bring it all together into a cohesive final proposal. So obviously there's going to need to be more discussion on this, and we will be continuing to discuss this at future meetings, but we are, between now and our next meeting, hoping for some feedback and comments from all of you in order to kind of help guide the development of those decisions. So we do thank you for the feedback that has come through today. We know we threw a lot of information at you. So so I hope we'll, as you're able to digest it, I hope we'll hear more from all of you. So again, in upcoming meetings, we will follow up on all of this and start to finalize some of these non-per capita program updates. We will also need to have a discussion about the GPCD program. We've heard feedback from a number of different stakeholders that the calculation to set targets for the GPCD program should be updated. Particularly the non-residential component should be updated for calculating those targets. So that'll be something that we'll need to have a discussion about. And we'll also want to touch on whether there should be any additional alternative programs in the fifth management plans. So something that had come up previously was some kind of a hybrid program, looking at maybe something like residential GPCD and non-residential BMPs or something like that. So we're looking for if there's support for that type of idea, or if there are any other ideas for other types of programs that we might be considering for the fifth management plans. So obviously there's a lot still to cover. So we'll continue moving through these conversations. We do appreciate all of your feedback and engagement throughout this process. We know it's been a lot. So thank you for the time that you all are investing in these conversations. Do we have any additional questions before we close out here?
Yes, thank you, Natalie. I have a comment here from John. He has stated, I just want to caution that the discussion is equating number of BMPs, or in some cases, the amount of effort required for each BMP with actual water conservation. They are not necessarily one and the same. Sure,
that's a fair point, John. And that's part of why we're kind of having some discussion around either having individual BMPs just be worth basically one BMP each, you just count up the number of BMPs, or you might have each BMP weighted based on So more points for ones that might be seen as more effort or more water conservation. So I think there are some considerations that can go into all of that. We're open to additional feedback on which direction we should go there. I think there's valid arguments for going either way. So I appreciate that feedback, and we're open to more thought and more discussion on that topic.
Thank you, Natalie. I also just wanted to note that Sam has included her contact information and details into the chat box. So if anybody has any additional questions on AmLaw's proposed NPCC structure, please feel free to reach out to her.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you, Sam.
I noticed Sam raised her hand, so I didn't know if she wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to touch on John's comment. AmLaw had taken out the points from our proposal because we wanted to increase that simplicity. We don't have any data yet from the fourth management plan where we had included a lot more reporting requirements to base those decisions. And a lot of them will take a lot of work or they'll be very expensive. So maybe we want them to be more points, but maybe they don't save more water. So until we have more data to prove the water savings, we were steering away from having those weighted BMPs. So thank you.
Thanks for that clarification. Do we have any other questions, Maggie?
No further questions.
So we will be posting this presentation. I know there's a lot of information and a lot of links in this presentation. This presentation will be available on ADWR's website either later today or by tomorrow. And obviously we already have a lot of these types of resources available on our 5MP meetings page. We do always post recordings from our meetings and all of our meeting materials on that 5MP meetings page. You can also find all of our upcoming meeting dates on ADWR's public meetings calendar. Our next meeting of this group, this municipal subgroup, will be on September 14th. So as I've mentioned a few times now, we have a lot to continue to cover. And we're really looking forward to continuing these conversations and seeing how all of this comes together. So we hope you will comment on the things that have been presented and discussed today and continue to participate in those meetings going forward. We do also have a, so we have a turf subgroup meeting coming up next week and a meeting of kind of our entire umbrella work group coming up on August 18th. So we hope that you will all participate and ask questions and bring your comments to those meetings as well. Do we have another question that came in?
Yes, Natalie, Dina's wondering what is the time frame that you would like the survey completed by?
Sure, great question. So again, there is the link to the questionnaire in the chat box. It's also in that, I think it was the third slide of the presentation that'll be posted online. So if you could possibly fill out that questionnaire by next week, that would be really helpful. I mentioned earlier that we also have a separate Google form for the individual BMPs for feedback on those. That we don't really have a time frame on. That one's a little bit more open-ended because we realize that's quite a big lift. So there are several opportunities for feedback. And additionally, with the questionnaire, if you aren't able to get to it in the next week, feel free to email us at managementplans@azwater.gov anytime. We are always taking questions and comments through that email address at all times. So yeah, with that, Maggie, did we have any other questions that I missed?
Thanks, Natalie. I'm not seeing any more questions or comments.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again. We appreciate your attention. We know this is a lot of information. There's a lot of moving pieces here. So thank you again for all of your attention, for all of your effort here. Thank you to Sam and McKenna for presenting today, for all of the work that went into preparing for this today. And we hope to be hearing from all of you with your thoughts on these concepts in the near future. So thank you for all your effort, for your participation today, and I hope you all stay safe. We'll hopefully see you soon.